The rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus pulled over to the side of the desolate highway, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. His 7-year-old daughter, Emma, pressed her small face against the back window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared at the crumpled figure lying in the ditch just beyond the guardrail. In that moment, with storm clouds gathering overhead and darkness closing in, Marcus faced a decision that would forever alter the trajectory of their lives. A choice between the safe path of driving away and the dangerous road of getting involved with a stranger who appeared to be taking their final breaths. Marcus had always taught Emma that kindness mattered, that helping others was the right thing to do. But as he sat there, engine idling, windshield wipers slapping rhythmically against the downpour, he felt the weight of single parenthood pressing down on his shoulders. It had been just the two of them since Emma's mother left 3 years ago, and every decision he made now carried double the responsibility. What if this was dangerous? What if helping put Emma at risk? But then he looked in the rearview mirror and saw his daughter's wide, trusting eyes, and he knew what he had to do. "Stay in the car, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "Lock the doors behind me." He stepped out into the rain, immediately soaked to the bone as he scrambled down the muddy embankment. The figure was a man, probably in his 60s, with silver hair matted against his pale forehead. His clothes were torn, and a nasty gash on his leg was bleeding steadily. But it was his eyes that caught Marcus. They were open, conscious, filled with pain and something else. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. It was there, but weak and thready. The man's lips moved, barely forming words. "Please, don't hospital." Marcus frowned. That was odd. The man clearly needed medical attention. "Sir, you're hurt." "I need to call 911. The stranger's hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping Marcus's wrist. "No police, please, they'll find me." Every instinct in Marcus's body screamed warning. This could be a criminal, someone running from the law. But looking at the man's weathered face, the desperation in his eyes, Marcus saw something that reminded him of his own father, a good man who'd fallen on hard times before he died. Against all logic, against everything that made sense, Marcus made his choice. He half-carried, half-dragged the stranger up the embankment. Emma had unlocked the door, her small face a mixture of worry and curiosity. Together, they managed to get the man into the back seat, Emma climbing into the front passenger seat without being asked. "Daddy, is he going to die?" she whispered as Marcus started, driving toward their small apartment on the outskirts of town. "Not if we can help it, baby. Not if we can help it." The next few hours blurred together. Marcus cleaned and bandaged the man's wounds with the first aid kit he kept in the apartment, his hands remembering the basic medical training from his brief stint in the military years ago. Emma helped, bringing towels and water, her natural compassion shining through despite her young age. The stranger drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering words they couldn't understand, sometimes just staring at the ceiling with haunted eyes. By midnight, the man's fever had broken. He opened his eyes fully for the first time, taking in his surroundings, the modest living room with its second-hand furniture, the child's drawings taped to the walls, the photo of Marcus and Emma on the mantel. "Why did you help me?" His voice was raspy but clear. Marcus looked up from the couch where he'd been keeping watch. "Because you needed help. That's what people do." "Not most people." The stranger tried to sit up, wincing. "You don't know what you've risked." Over the next few days, the story emerged in fragments. The man's name was Robert, and he'd been a whistleblower at a major pharmaceutical company, exposing their practice of price-gouging life-saving medications. He'd thought he was protected, but threats had come anyway. Someone had run him off the road that rainy night, left him for dead. He'd been trying to get to a safe house, to a journalist who could help him, but he hadn't made it. Marcus listened, his journalist instincts from his college days awakening. He'd given up those dreams when Emma was born, taken a steady job in accounting to provide stability. But this story, this mattered. "Let me help you," Marcus said. "I know people. We can get your story out there." Robert shook his head. You've done enough. More than enough. When I'm strong enough, I'll leave, and you can forget this ever happened." But Emma had other ideas. She'd taken to bringing Robert drawings she made at school, sitting with him while he recovered, telling him stories about her day. She'd lost so many people in her young life, her mother, her grandfather, and somehow this broken stranger had awakened her protective instincts. "Mr. Robert can't leave yet," she announced one evening at dinner. "He's family now." Marcus saw tears well up in Robert's eyes, and something shifted in the room. They were all broken in different ways. Marcus trying to be both father and mother, Emma learning to trust again, Robert fighting to do the right thing despite the cost. Together they'd formed an unlikely family. But danger hadn't forgotten them. 1 week after they'd found Robert, Marcus came home from work to find 2 men in dark suits parked outside their apartment building. His blood ran cold. He called Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who watched Emma after school, and told her to take Emma to the library and wait there. Then he went upstairs, his heart in his throat. Robert was at the window, his face grim. "They found me." "I'm sorry, Marcus. I never should have put you and Emma in danger." Marcus's mind raced. He thought of his daughter, of the life they'd built together. He thought of doing the easy thing, the safe thing, telling Robert to leave, washing his hands of the whole situation. But then he thought of the man he wanted Emma to see when she looked at him, the kind of person he wanted her to become. "We're not giving up," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to fight this the right way." He grabbed his phone and started making calls. To his old journalism professor, who now worked at a major newspaper. To a lawyer friend from his army days who specialized in whistleblower protection. To Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband worked for a civil rights organization. One by one he assembled a team. People who believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard. The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. The story broke on the front page of the Washington Post. Pharmaceutical giant exposed for systematic price gouging. Whistleblower nearly killed for speaking out. The men in dark suits disappeared. Federal investigators appeared instead, offering Robert protection in exchange for his testimony. But what stunned everyone wasn't just the story itself. It was what happened next. Marcus and Emma's act of kindness went viral. Someone had leaked the story of how a single father and his young daughter had saved a dying stranger, nursed him back to health, and helped bring down corporate corruption. Letters poured in from across the country, from other whistleblowers inspired to come forward, from families who'd lost loved ones because they couldn't afford medication, from ordinary people moved by a simple act of compassion. Donations flooded in, more money than Marcus had ever seen. But he didn't keep it. Instead, he and Emma, with Robert's help, established a foundation to help families afford life-saving medications. They called it Emma's Hope, and the 7-year-old girl who'd insisted a stranger was family became the face of a movement. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a congressional hearing room, Emma on one side and Robert on the other. They were testifying about the need for pharmaceutical reform, about the power of ordinary citizens to create change. Emma held Marcus's hand tight, and he gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Why did you help me?" Robert had asked that first night, and Marcus had said it was what people do. But the truth was more complicated than that. Marcus had helped because Emma was watching, because he wanted to raise a daughter who saw need and responded with compassion rather than fear. He'd helped because somewhere along the way, he'd learned that the safe choice and the right choice weren't always the same thing. The legislation passed, a landmark bill ensuring affordable access to life-saving medications. At the signing ceremony, the president shook Emma's hand and asked her what inspired her to help a stranger. Emma looked up at her father, then back at the president with the simple wisdom of a child. He needed help. That's what families do. That evening, Marcus tucked Emma into bed in their same small apartment. They'd moved Robert into the spare room permanently. He was working with the foundation now, his pharmaceutical expertise invaluable, his presence filling a grandfather-shaped hole in Emma's life. "Daddy," Emma said sleepily, "I'm glad we stopped that day." Marcus kissed her forehead. "Me too, sweetheart, me too." He turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching his daughter drift off to sleep. That rainy night on the highway felt like a lifetime ago. Marcus had been so afraid of danger, of the unknown, of making the wrong choice. But in choosing compassion over fear, in teaching his daughter that kindness mattered more than safety, he'd discovered something profound. The world changed when people chose to help, when they saw strangers not as threats but as fellow humans, deserving of dignity and care. One act of kindness had rippled outward, creating waves that touched thousands of lives. Marcus thought of all the people who now had access to affordable medication, all the families who wouldn't have to choose between treatment and bankruptcy, all because he'd pulled over on a rainy highway. Robert emerged from his room, moving much easier now that his injuries had healed. "She's asleep?" Marcus nodded. Out like a light, they stood together in comfortable silence. Two men who'd become unlikely brothers, united by a little girl's unshakable faith in the goodness of people. "Thank you," Robert said quietly, "for everything. You saved my life." Marcus shook his head. "You saved ours too. You reminded us what matters." Outside, rain began to fall again, pattering softly against the windows. But inside, there was warmth and light and love. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by compassion, by the simple decision to help when help was needed. And somewhere across the country, other families were making similar choices, inspired by a single father and his daughter, who'd proven that ordinary people could create extraordinary change, one act of kindness at a time. The world was becoming a little bit better, a little bit brighter. That was the real miracle. Not that they'd helped a stranger, but that their choice had shown others what was possible when we chose love over fear, compassion over convenience, humanity over indifference. In the end, it wasn't what Marcus and Emma did that left everyone stunned. It was what their actions inspired others to do, creating a cascade of kindness that would ripple forward for generations to come.